It's me, Mario. Hello.
I have always enjoyed the Mario games that Nintendo puts out. On each console Nintendo releases, they always have a Mario game or two to help boost the console's sales, but also show off the hardware and accessories for that console. Super Mario 64 was that one Mario game for the Nintendo 64 that you had to own if you had an N64. It showed off the power of the N64, but it took full advantage of the controller with the thumbstick. It was such an amazing launch game for the console that it goes down as one of N64's masterpiece games. I unfortunately didn't get my copy of Mario 64 until years later. I think it was 2010, where I bought off Amazon for $20. But I can remember back in 1996, when the N64 launched, how excited I was to play this new Mario game on the coolest new console. The only way for me to play Mario 64 back in 96 was to either go to a friend's house who owned the game and play with them, or actually rent the console from a video rental store and rent the game along with it, which I did a few times with my friends. Now it's 2021, and Nintendo decided to release Mario 64 for the Switch console. As part of Mario's 35th anniversary in a 3-game package called Super Mario 3D All-Stars, I of course picked up my copy of the game, excited to play Mario 64 updated in HD resolution. Before I even picked up a copy of Super Mario 3D All-Stars, I did boot up my N64 a year ago to play some of those games for the heck of it, and the graphics have not aged well. In fact, trying to play with the N64 controller was difficult for modern gamers who are used to having a joystick that's smooth and accurate, not clunky and stiff to move around. So having the ability to replay Mario 64 on modern controllers was amazing. Now let's talk about gameplay. The gameplay for the Switch version was as good as I remember the game to be. The initial opening scene where Mario jumps out the warp pipe to be greeted by Lakitu, who's holding the camera and making it sound like we were watching a show, is just as good as I remember. Only this time, with the graphics being sharper and brighter than the 64 version. Heck, even the frustrating deaths are still relevant today, and believe me, I died many times that really did enrage me. Now let's take a second and go back to compare it to the previous 2D Mario games. The first reaction to seeing Mario in 3D was pretty amazing at that time. The fact that you can run him around in 360-degree circles and do backflips and such made the previous platforming games child's play. This was the future. To me, there was no need to see Mario do 2D side-scrolling after seeing this. Now, playing this game did take some getting used to. If you're already familiar with 3D platforms before, this game should be easy for you, but at the time, this was revolutionary since not many 3D platform games were out. You had the PlayStation and Sega Saturn as competitors, and they didn't have many 3D platforms at the time. It was only years later, after the success of Mario 64, that Sony and Sega started releasing 3D platforms for their system. Then, of course, fast forward to today, and playing 3D platforms is now the norm. You almost expect modern games to play better than what we got in Mario 64 with the technology and controls we have. If you have played Mario 64 before, then there won't be any surprises. A nice benefit Nintendo did add to this version is rumble support, which was not available on the initial Mario 64 game. A nice touch Nintendo also added was widescreen support and higher resolution graphics, so when playing on your HD TV, it makes the game that much nicer to look at. As I played through this game to collect the stars, a lot of how to get them came back. Many of what I needed to do was just second nature to me, even though it had been years since I played this game. Now, I did need to look up more than I had hoped for, because even though I remembered what I did for certain stars, I did forget the rest of them, so thankfully I had Google to help me out. There were some stars I had completely forgotten about, so it felt like I was getting them for the very first time. One thing that made this game unique at the time was the ability to play the levels you want. You can choose which levels and stars you wanted to go for. Yes, you do need stars to unlock other parts of the castle, but where you were one of those that just got enough stars to move on, or were you a true gamer and got all 7 stars in each level before proceeding on? This game gave Mario different abilities that we normally wouldn't see in previous Mario games. For instance, Metal Mario. This ability came in handy in water levels mostly because Mario would sink when using that blue cap. There are some stars that would only be collected if you had that power-up cap unlocked. I enjoyed this feature adding more interesting gameplay to the mix, but also made it so you would not have to come back later in the game to get that star, making exploration more prominent in this game. In total, you have 120 stars to collect to get 100% completion. That is something I was able to achieve in my copy of Mario 64 for the N64, and it's something I'm working on right now with the Switch version. 105 stars you can get from all levels you play, 6 for completing tasks in those levels, and the 7th one is from collecting 100 coins in that level. There are 15 hidden stars throughout the castle that you need to find. Talking to Toad alone will give you 3 of those stars. 3 stars are from collecting the 8 red coins in Bowser's levels, and another 3 are from the cap levels, collecting the red coins from them. I did read that Nintendo had originally intended to have over 40 levels, and at one point had 32 playable. One of the drawbacks was trying to fit all that on a 64 megabyte cartridge was near impossible, so they scaled it back to 15 we now see in the game, putting more emphasis on exploration and completing more tasks as ways to complete the levels. I'll admit, playing Mario 64 on Nintendo Switch Pro Controller was just awesome. It feels so smooth and fluent. I tried playing it with the Joy-Cons, and to me it was rather unpleasant and difficult. The controls for this version are pretty simple to get a hold of. The Z button is now the LZ, which made it feel just right when doing the long jumps. One thing I will point out is that even though the control is a lot better than using the original 64 controller, there were times where controlling Mario got frustrating because he wasn't moving in the direction you wanted him to. Biggest example is when he is swimming. Man, did it take longer for me to get hold of out of that water than it should have. Another example is trying to get Mario to turn or move around. With the original controller, his rotation radius was bigger than most games are today. Plus, with modern controls, we can make those turns a lot more tight than back in the original controller. I feel like that is the only drawback to the consoles of this game. If you're a whiz at playing Mario on the N64 controller, you should have no problem controlling him now. Another cool thing I noticed when playing on modern controllers is how sensitive the joystick can be, so even the slightest touch will make Mario tiptoe. Is that much easier than on the N64 controller. Controlling Mario now has that he is in 3D has its challenges, but also brought its advantages, allowing more moves for Mario than just a jump and run. You can crawl, tippy-toe, walk, and run, but you can also do a triple jump, and a side flip, and even a triple backflip. One awesome feature that was added with Mario's abilities was to grab onto ledges. You wouldn't believe how many times I had close calls with Mario grabbing onto ledges. If it weren't for that ability, a lot of these levels would have to be redesigned to accommodate. One of the nice changes Nintendo did make for the Switch version for this game was to make the right joystick control the camera. When using the original N64 controller, you would use the yellow C buttons to change the camera rotation. But with modern controls now, people are used to using the right joystick to control the camera. With this being a first for Nintendo in terms of 3D, the camera in the game doesn't do a good job as we would expect in today's standards. You're unable to do a 360-degree rotation for Mario, almost expect that in open-world 3D games. This did make some levels frustrating to complete when the camera angle wasn't at the best angle for you to get the job done. So trying to fiddle with the camera does get old, especially as you progress in the game, and need to view different angles to see what you are doing. Listening to the music as I play this game is just bringing back so many memories. I thought the music fit in the game perfectly as a kid, but now listening to it again as an adult, I can't argue with that. The emulation Nintendo used to port this game over did not skimp on the music quality. It sounds just as good as other games on my soundbar. The music does sound 90s. At least for me it does when I hear the soundtrack. It feels like the songs or music you would hear in games during the 90s. Nintendo used a lot of digital synthesizers to create the music for this game. Example would be the main title as you would select which of the 4 stages you will play. Even just listening to the main theme for this game, you feel the nostalgia and excitement that this game will bring. That is another thing to keep in mind when Mario games advance, so do their soundtracks. If you all went back and listened to what the songs were like on the SNES, you will no doubt tell it's a 16-bit game. The fact that Nintendo is now more capable of making better music for the games just adds more value to the game and overall quality you expect from Nintendo. They did include the soundtrack on the 3D Mario All-Stars, so if you ever want to go back and listen to Dire Dire Docks, you can without having to jump the actual game to listen to it. Mario 64 was Nintendo's biggest selling game, selling 11.62 million units until 2003 when the N64 was discontinued. I know there are a lot of people out there that prefer the 2D side-scrolling Mario games. I do too. I really enjoy the Mario Maker series and 3D games. But now we're in a 3D gaming world. It only seems fit to have Mario take advantage of that. Nintendo did release a remake of the Mario 64 for the Nintendo DS in 2004, simply called Super Mario 64 DS. With newer graphics, levels, more character display, and a multiplayer mode, this is a game I would like to play down the road. Hopefully Nintendo releases it on the eStore or possibly a Nintendo DS online platform that they're doing now for the SNES and NES systems with their online services for the Switch. To wrap things up, I was able to achieve all 120 stars back on my copy of Mario 64 for the N64. Having accomplished that back then, something I was proud of. I only knew a few people who had gotten 100% of the game, and this was before YouTube creators started showing that off. Having the ability now to replay the same game in high resolution on modern controllers made me more excited to own a copy of this game. Like I mentioned earlier, the N64 has not aged well for modern TVs, And now that Nintendo's making efforts to preserve and release these previous games on the Switch console, it's not only a great thing to do, but also a way to introduce new generation of gamers to this classic game. If you did not pick up a copy of 3D Mario All-Stars when it was out, that is unfortunate, but I hope Nintendo will re-release the game again in the future. I feel everyone should have a chance to play this game whether they do back on the N64 or with the updated version for the Switch. Either way, this is a Mario game that you shouldn't get passed up. I hope you enjoyed this video. I plan on doing more perspective videos where I give my thoughts on the game in a more personal viewpoint. If you'd like to see more of these perspective videos, please subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.